Hello and welcome to Avernus, the first layer of the Dark Hells, or as we like to call it, the only one worth stopping at. Yes, that's right. Delightful environment, lava, blood, demons, devils. Quite frankly, why anyone would want to go further is beyond us. We'd prefer it if you stayed here for all eternity. Of course, you don't have much of a choice, do you? You belong here down with us, don't you? Yes, they do. Oh, yes, they do. Hello and welcome to this episode of How to Be a Great GM. My name is Guy, and today we're looking at the book Descent Into Avernus by Dungeons and Dragons, that wonderful, wonderful institution, owned of course by Wizards of the Coast. Before we go any further, this remarkable leather jacket, which I will be wearing during the show, was proudly sponsored by the Leather Lair. So if you're looking for some pretty spanky swag, go and check them out. Links down below. Now, when we talk about Descent into Avernus, full disclosure, I have been hired by Wizards of the Coast to run a game for them on their Twitch channel, twitch.tv/DND. You can, of course, watch those shows here 2 weeks later on this channel. So I have a bias, I suppose you could say, to this particular publication. Or do I? Well, when I first got hold of it a couple of weeks ago, I started to devour it, to read it. I'd heard all kinds of things, like, oh, it's Mad Max and hell, and all those kinds of wonderful things that have been going around. And of course, I had watched all of the material that has been going around. And in the last few weeks, even more material has been presented in terms of just what does this book allow us to do? What is in there? What's all the content? So that's what we're going to look at today. It's got spoilers, so if you don't want to know what you can expect in here, there's some spoilers in there, but there's so much more to that as well. So let's bring up some slides here. Let me hide the book away now. Descent into Avernus. What is it? What do you get? But what do you need to know in order to play it? Who is this grim-faced, fiery, haloed individual, or this pale rider? What is all of that about? What's all of that? So we're going to unpack a little bit of that. We're going to go into it in brief detail. So if you are not familiar with the concepts of Avernus, of demons and devils and the like, well, this is the video for you. If you want a play-by-play unpack of what's in the book, this is not the video for you, because that video would be about a year long. The book is crammed full of stuff, so there's so much stuff that where do we start? Where do we start? I don't know, there's too much. So, what is it? Let's unpack that first. What is Descent into Avernus? Baldur's Gate Descent into Avernus, to give it its full title. Well, Avernus is the first layer of the 9 hells. It's not a new concept. It's been around for a very long time in our own mythology. You merely need to read Dante's Inferno to get a sense of the different layers of hell. And each layer is there for a specific one of the 7 deadly sins and more. So when we talk about hell, there's all kinds of things that go along with that. Now, of course, from our own mythology, there's a lot of Catholicism that kind of comes into this whole picture, and it kind of gets muddy. But you can push all of that aside. You don't have to worry about any of that for Descent into Avernus. So Avernus is this plane, this area of existence where souls predominantly that have been involved in prideful or violent acts get stuck. So when they have been condemned to one of the levels of hell, they go to Avernus if they were prideful or if they were violent, generally speaking. And there's a reason for it. There is this thing going on, which you'll hear about, which my entire stream is about, as a matter of fact, known as the Blood War. And that is a war that has been raging for quite some time between devils, and demons. We'll get to Mad Max a little bit. The Blood War rages between the devils and the demons, and there's this perpetual war where the demons are trying to invade everywhere, basically, and they happen to have sprung up in Avernus because of the river Styx. Again, drawn from Greek mythology this time, I think, in terms of this river that's, sort of pervades through and cuts through Avernus, and has some very, very diabolical events happen if the characters happen to drink from the river Styx. So, nonetheless, the demons are escaping from the river characteristics into Avernus, and the devils are fighting back against them, which presumably is why those that are full of pride and those who are full of violence kind of get stuck there, because they get stuck with all of the violence and this sort of war that's going on between it. Now, the book doesn't handle the war specifically. It looks more about the individual in the picture behind me. This lady, Zariel. Now, Zariel is an angel, or was an angel, from the angelic host, who decided that the angels should interfere with this devils and demons battle. This spills out into all of the different spheres, all of the different planes of existence within the traditional Dungeons and Dragons setting. So if you are using those, these will, from time to time, pop up. The devils are primarily trying to get more souls to join their armies to help them defeat the demons. The demons are just trying to destroy and cause chaos as much as they can. So this lady decided that the angels should get involved and should journey down into Avernus to reclaim, or to claim it, I should say, and to once and for all put an end to the blood war, so that the devils no longer needed to really corrupt mortals to feed their ranks, but also so that the demons could get pushed further back into the abyss and so that they could get forgotten about. Well, that's my interpretation of this whole thing anyway. It's been going on for quite a long time, not only in Dungeons and Dragons mythology, but also in the game world. It's an old struggle for domination. Now, Avernus itself is a hell-like space. There's volcanoes and lava, and there's no sky. It's just this grim space. Everything that's eaten sours in the mouth and gets bitter, and there's no pleasure whatsoever. It kind of goes without saying, because this is one of the levels of hell. It is one of the layers of hell, and should be a rather nasty place to visit, regardless of why you're there. The book goes into some very good detail in terms of how to handle those kind of conditions, and the player characters will be put under a huge amount of pressure if they're going to spend an extended period of time there and don't resolve to make alliances or deals with those that actually live there. There are some sanctuaries, there are some spaces where they can get to where the effects of Avernus are not going to corrupt them, or the demons are not going to corrupt them. So that's what I very much like about the book, is that it isn't just, well, this is Avernus, take it or leave it. This is Avernus, and this is Avernus as a result of the demon incursion. So we start to get a bit of a feeling for that war, even if the war itself is kind of happening in the background. Characters that step into Demon Ichor, for example, can suddenly go through these weird transformations if they fail Constitution saving throws and get their eyes growing out on stalks. Or there's all kinds of weird and wonderful mutations that can happen, as well as a whole lot of things like exhaustion, etc., etc. So from a settings perspective, Avernus is very, very, very different from the average walk in the forest or in a mountain type of thing. So if you haven't ventured into the outer planes before, or into this particular area anyway, this is a phenomenal resource for you to do that. And I was reading it going, okay, I didn't know that, I didn't know that, I didn't know that. I haven't bought much into the actual setting of Dungeons and Dragons. I've always homebrewed my own. But it did cause me to think about a certain amount of things. Now, something that a lot of people have been talking about is that, or have been calling this book, is Mad Max in Hell. Because of this idea that there are these infernal war machines, which are these giant craft or smaller craft that have been constructed out of bits of metal and bone and flesh and all kinds of weird and wonderful things, and that are powered by souls that move around the plains of Avernus. That is, in truth, there is a component of the book that talks about it, but it's a minuscule component. So to think that that is all that this is, and to dismiss it as just that, is completely wrong. And you're going to see why in the next section, because there is so much more. But it's definitely there, and the mechanics have been polished up from Ghosts of Saltmarsh in terms of how those craft can be utilized by the players and how you can use them in your game as the dungeon master to really ramp up the experience of Avernus as being this otherworldly place. The book takes the characters from level 1 through 13. You've heard this before. This is not new. What is interesting, however, is how they do it. The way that the book is presented, it's broken into 3 distinct acts, which I would love to explore. And I think, personally, when I look at the book, there is at least a 1-year campaign at least a 1-year campaign's worth of material in those 3 acts. And the 3 acts happen in very distinct and different areas, which I particularly appreciate. And what I really, really like about it is that although some of it takes place in Baldur's Gate, some of it takes place in Avernus, and some of it takes place elsewhere, which I'm not going to spoil for you, but it's a different space altogether. Because the book takes place in those 3 different areas, you as the game master, or as the dungeon master I should say, you get the opportunity to really expand and explore upon your descriptors and the way that you handle stuff. And what I particularly like as well is the fact that the first 6 levels, 5 or 6 levels, it's very much an investigation. It's a very different kind of feeling. There's a lot of subterfuge, there's a lot of mystery, there's a lot of unknown quantities going on. When the characters actually arrive in hell, it's pure and simple survival. And it's survival at its very best. The environment is trying to kill the players. The monsters in the environment are trying to kill the players. There are devils out there who don't want to necessarily kill the players, but want to make deals with them because they want their souls. This is a particularly juicy part of this entire book. The whole idea that devils want to make deals with the characters, and there's restrictions and rules on how those devils can make those kinds of contracts, which I also thought was very useful. It was a kind of a nice guide as, well, a low-level devil can offer this, a high-level devil can offer that, and this is why they would do it. And there's an advancement structure in there as well, which is what I particularly enjoy. So there are these different spaces, the different phases that the book goes through, and that the player's journeys, well, player character journeys, will go on. And I really, really, really appreciate that. I think that it's a super cool idea to have done it in this way. So the book is much more than just dealing with a hellscape, to dealing with Zariel. Defeat of Zariel, as a matter of fact, is not the end of the adventure. It's merely a major milestone in that adventure, which then moves on to other things, which I think is very exciting and very interesting from that perspective, because you go, well, the characters might be fighting this one. They might. That's not the end goal, though. There's something beyond that, which I really like. Now, what's also interesting, I find, is that the book is split. When the characters arrive in Avernus, the book branches in terms of the characters can take this route or they can take that route. And there's different quests that they can go on, and you can add and drop as you so desire. Like I said, there is more than a year's worth of campaign in this book as far as I'm concerned. I wish I could actually run it over the course of a year, because there is just so much wonderful, wonderful material, let alone what the players will be bringing to this entire experience, because the players are going to have a lot of preconceptions and character builds that they think is going to fit hell, which again is why I like the fact that the book is split in different directions. So let's go and have a look. So why would you get this book? Why would you invest in this book? Apart from the fact that the book has this 3-act structure, it's very cinematic. When I was reading it, I was like, this is like a movie. This is like watching possibly a trilogy, and a good trilogy for that matter, as these characters evolve and change, and then they get dumped in the worst conditions, and then they survive and they thrive, hopefully, and then they get out of that and they get into a worse situation, which again they have to overcome using everything at their disposal. There's nothing that has been left out. The adventures vary from social adventures to combat adventures to traps to mystery solving. It's absolutely wonderful. So the structure of this book is, I think, a very good basis from which to launch this campaign, or any other campaign for that matter. And if you get it just to look at it and go, okay, so this is what they did, this is how they started it, this is how they led the story, the narrative to this particular point, this is what happened, then we went into a completely different environment, this is how the adventures changed and evolved to mimic that, to mirror that, and then finally this is how it then concluded. It's very good just to look at it from that structural perspective, and to look at how each of the adventures is different from the other, so that even when the characters have completed this one, there's still more. Or when they get into a nebulous area, so there's lots of areas where there are multiple things going on here, and the player characters are free to explore whichever ones or multiple versions they want to in order to advance the plot. So there's not there is pressure on the characters to move forward, but at the same time they've said, okay, if this is your rest spot, if this is where you're going to call home for a bit, here are a couple little side quests that you can go on and that you can explore and expand upon as well as the DM. So that is definitely something that I think is very valuable to take out of this book, aside from all of the content that is already in there. The mood is also incredibly well captured. The artwork is incredibly evocative. I mean, it's really, really gorgeous artwork. That's something that we would always expect from Wizards of the Coast. But at the same time, the environment that they have created, there are wonderful things in there. They're drawing on all of their years' worth of production in terms of what is Avernus like and what are the creatures that live there. But at the same time, they're giving you, the Dungeon Master, a whole lot of additional tools, the different environments that are there. These are kinds of environments that we don't normally encounter in the prime material plane. There are creatures and foliage in this environment. Yes, there is foliage in hell, and you do not want to come across it. There are a whole bunch of things in here that are really, really interesting takes, and the mood that it sets is very depressive. It's one of the biggest challenges that I feel that you're going to have as a dungeon master when running Descent into Avernus, is the mood is oppressive. And that's in all three acts. It's oppressive, it's heavy, it's a fall from grace story. Ultimately, as its backstory, it's this war, it's savage, it's violent. The characters that you encounter in Avernus are inherently evil. That's why they're in Avernus. They're inherently evil, so your NPC support becomes limited. It means, as a dungeon master, there is a risk that you become stuck in this very morose space. So you have to think about, how do you add levity? How do you add a little bit of fun into this? Because ultimately we're here to play a game. We're here to have fun. It could be a very serious, very gritty, gory, bloody game, and that's certainly what the setting inspires. But there are also elements in there, like Lulu, the Hollyphant. The Hollyphant. I don't know why they always have to pronounce it like that in my games. Nonetheless, Lulu the Hollyphant is there, and there is a certain amount of humor that comes in. It might be dark humor, but anyway, that for me is one of the big challenges with this book. And it's not a bad challenge, it's a good challenge. You should always be seeking to figure out how to keep your games dynamic in terms of mood, and this book certainly gives you some of that. So what do you need to know in order to run Avernus, in order to run Descent into Avernus? What do you need to know? Well, you need to know about the demons versus the devils. That's the first thing. What's the difference between a demon and a devil? The long and short of it is, demons are from the abyssal plane and just want to cause chaos and destruction. They represent chaos and destruction, as a matter of fact. In their forms, I beg your pardon, in their forms, they're often mutated, they're often collections of other bits and pieces, and very seldom can they be rationaled with. They are not that kind of negotiating monster. They really are terrifying. They are also usually, I beg your pardon, incredibly dangerous. So that is definitely something to keep in mind. Devils, on the other hand, are lawful evil. Generally speaking, they believe in a hierarchy. They report to upper devils. They have ranks within their army. They have legions and cohorts. They work within a structure. And when a devil makes a deal, they stick to that deal unless they can find a loophole, unless they can find something. And generally they will try to build that in. I'll do a favor for you now. Tell you what, pay me back when I ask, and it'll be something small. So, devils will try and keep their deals open-ended on their behalf, not on behalf of the player characters. So you have immediately this very distinct playstyle. Demons, destructive, chaotic, absolutely just annihilists of their environment and on everyone and anything they come into contact with, sometimes possessing strange knowledge that wouldn't be normally accessible, as opposed to the devils, who are violent, no doubt about that. They really don't mind violence whatsoever, but who have a code of conduct that needs to be followed. And again, that just creates this interesting space. You also have evil versus survival. Now, I was mentioning earlier on one of the biggest challenges that you're going to have in dealing with Avernus is how to keep the game entertaining, how to keep the moments of joy and happiness interspersed with all of this bleakness. The evil versus survival element is also a big challenge and is definitely present here. Now, what is the difference between evil and survival, and how are they even in the same sentence? The characters that the players are most likely to encounter, specifically in Avernus, but certainly in the first section and in the third section, but specifically in Avernus, the majority of them are going to be evil. This means that when your player characters start to get used to the fact that a lot of the characters that they're going to meet, a lot of the NPCs they're going to meet, are going to try and be manipulative, are going to try and use them for something else, for a hidden agenda. They're going to push back on dealing with your NPCs. And that is the last place you want to be as a dungeon master. You don't want to have players going, we don't want to talk to them because they're going to screw us over. So when we talk about evil versus survival, it's about realizing that the character might be inherently evil. The character might have no moral standing, no moral compass. The character might just be someone who's violent. But if they've got a shred of intelligence, they're going to work out that survival becomes more important. So a lot of the NPCs that the party can face, you need to make sure that they might be, well, I'm here because I kick puppies and murder chickens in their sleep. But I won't murder you because you can allow me to survive. So as a matter of fact, I'm actually going to help you beyond that which you have required, because if I keep you alive long enough, it means you're keeping me alive. And that's a better trade-off than just being evil. So that's what you need to lodge away in the back of your mind, is that yes, there's a lot of evil down here because it's Avernus, but that evil will give away to survival. If the character can survive because of the PCs, they will do that rather than betray the PCs simply because of their alignment. So don't get stuck in that trap. Make sure that there is a differentiator so that your PCs go, they're probably evil, but they also need to survive. So that's the angle we must exploit. That's the angle we must look at. That's the angle we have to come from. So bear that in mind. And then the environmental. So there's lots of environmental effects that can help the environment feel alive, can help the mood feel very, very atmospheric, but which can also get in the way. Again, it's a balance between how often do you mutate the player characters into these weird things that they didn't intend for their characters to be in the first place. How often do you use those environmental effects versus the story? Now, again, the rule book has, well, you know, for every 1 day spent wandering around, do this, do that, roll this save, roll that save. That can become laborious if the characters are there for an extended period of time. You need to decide as the dungeon master, are you going to mutate those player characters? Are you going to cause them to have this issue and have that issue because they're in this hellscape? It can certainly make them feel as if they are in hell. But bearing in mind, we do this for entertainment, and a lot of people are going to go, you know what? I'm sick of this hell space. All of my abilities are muted. All of my saving throws are with disadvantage. I've got exhaustion up the yin-yang. I have this weird third arm which I can't do anything with and which just keeps getting in the way. It becomes too much after a while. So there's an amount of balance. We need to bring this balance in. Yes, the environmentals are there. Yes, the book gives you access to them. But sometimes you need to just hold back. So Descent into Avernus, in my opinion, is a very well-written adventure campaign, I think is a better word for it, because it really is a campaign, and it has such wonderful scope. The NPCs that they've written into the book, some of them are very, very obvious in terms of their write-ups, so you can tweak that. Remember, we were talking about mood and creating inspiration, drawing inspiration. So the character, you might go, well, that's a little bit too obvious, too on the nose, I want to change that, but that's the beauty of these books, is that you can do that. As I have said, it's a year-long, if not more, campaign that sits inside this book. And a lot of emphasis has been placed on Avernus, like this video, for example, but that's not where the majority of the material actually takes place. So it's a wonderful introductory book Not sure I would give this to first-time players of Dungeons and Dragons. Rather, let's stick to the Mines of Fendelvir and the Essentials kit. This is for a bunch of players who go, you know what, we want to up our game and we want to be challenged. We want to have everything thrown at us. The environment, the NPCs. We want different scapes. We want it all. Well, then in my opinion, this is it. It really is. There is enough here for you as a dungeon master to give your own input, but at the same time, there's so much here that when I was reading this, I'm just going to use that, I'm going to use that, I'm going to use that, I'm just going to use the whole book. That's my honest opinion on this subject. Now, I normally, and I'm quite happy to say this, normally I don't run pre-written material like this because I find it too restrictive. Oh, I've got to remember this, and I've got to remember that, and I've got to remember the next thing. And I've done videos where I have said, I don't like running modules because of this entire idea. This isn't a module, this is a campaign guide. And you can dip into it and pull out of it as you so choose. And I have to say, having looked at this in comparison to some of the previous material, this has been so far my favorite in terms of what they've given us, in terms of the content, maybe not in terms of the location. I love the idea of devils versus demons. That's why I'm basing mine before the book events take place. But I think it's a really, really good investment. If you like this kind of stuff, then this is one that you're not going to be unhappy with. You really, really, really won't. Bonus material, for those of you that have stayed behind, the war machines and the cities. I think this is something that people have paid a lot of attention to, the war machines, definitely. But what do the war machines mean for you as a dungeon master? So just the idea of, okay, great, so there's these war machines, they're super cool, we can have a chase sequence, and then we're kind of done. No, I think these war machines are vastly underutilized. Not necessarily in the Descent into Avernus story because there's so much going on, but I do think that a lot of the factors that one is going to have to take into consideration, the environmental issues, the fact that there's a war going on and that a legion of devils might come past or a legion of demons might attack, and the party is going to be constantly on the move, moving around and that sort of thing. I think the war machines become a great opportunity for you as a dungeon master. You let the players get hold of a war machine, and there is an adventure within the book that allows them to do that. You let them get a hold of that war machine, and then you add on to it. You make it a little bit more Mad Maxy, as a matter of fact, than that is currently written into the book. But use this as a mobile base of operations. Let them gather together a few NPCs that are actually remorseful souls. Individuals who've been in Avernus for a long time and have realized the error of their ways. It happens. People make mistakes and then they learn from them. Have the crew of these war machines support the PC base so that this becomes their sanctuary. So when they start going all over the place and exploring and all that kind of stuff, this is almost their own private castle. Let them store stuff in there safely, let them retreat to it, let them use it as a vehicle for moving across, let them build up some reputation as having one of these great war machines. And in terms of powering the war machine, there is a big challenge. If you have a group of good players who journey into Avernus, they may not be too keen on using soul coins to power these machines. Obliterating souls to keep your machine running, that could be a problem for good players. Could be. I'm not saying it's going to be, but it could be. So, what does that mean? It means you can come up with alternatives. And the immediate alternative, as far as I'm concerned, is magic energy, magical items. If the mage casts a level 3 spell, remember the players are going to be level 6 to 13 in this stage. If the mage casts a level 3 spell into the engine, it will power the engine for 3 days or 2 days or 1 day, depending on the level of the spell. So I would come up with an alternative so that parties who have an issue with soul coins would then be able to use these machines anyway, because you're going to be using this as their base of operations so that they do have somewhere that they can call home, that they can retreat to, because they're going to need to do that. I would imagine anyway, certainly in my games, this is something that's going to be absolutely important for them to do. Then the cities, there are a couple cities that are included in this book, and there's some beautiful maps that outline the shape of the city and all of the contents within that city. Use those maps to make your environment feel richer. And by that I mean you have Avernus, you've got this amazing landscape. don't let that overshadow Baldur's Gate, for example. Now, I have never played any of the Baldur's Gate games. Never. I have always maintained, why play a D&D computer game when I can just play D&D? The graphics in my head will beat anything that a computer is going to give, maybe not until when we get to virtual reality, but until such time, I can live in my head. I can't live inside a computer game, but that's beside the point. I don't know anything about Baldur's Gate. Now, in the game that I'm running, I'm skipping Baldur's Gate, not because I don't know anything about it, but because everyone is expecting Avernus. The maps that you get given, though, walk those streets. Look at some of the videos that I've done earlier on how do you live your environment. You walk it, you experience it, and you can make it feel a lot different from Avernus. So where Avernus is these vast stretching plains of distorting reality, I'm not going to go into the details of it, you can find that out in the book, but where these vast plains, Baldur's Gate to me feels very confined, very dark. So Avernus, although you would think it's dark, there's no night or day. There's this constant fog which exists, this weird twilight type of feeling. So Baldur's Gate, play around with that, make it bright during the day, dark at night. The other cities, Elatriel, for example, same thing. Use the environment and use the cities that are there to give them very distinctive flavors. Something that may be of benefit, now this is from the book, this is from my own personal insight, is that the cities that are involved, Baldur's Gate and Elatriel, I think I'm pronouncing that incorrectly, but anyway, the two cities predominantly that your players will encounter, try to make them thematically different. In the book, they are neighbors. Make sure that if you are using them as neighbors, that the kingdoms feel distinctly different. That was one thing that to me didn't really read very well, was the fact that the two cities felt similar. I think you can take it a step further, and by making them dissimilar, so for example, perhaps one is more the traditional medieval, Baldur's Gate for example, and then the other is more elvish in nature, or perhaps dwarvish. Make it feel different. Use your descriptives, use your maps to, the city map is great, but when you're doing your battle maps and that sort of thing, use an alternative so that there's a different feeling. So there's a very distinct feeling. So that would be my advice on how to do that. That's it from Descent into Avernus. I can't say much more about it other than I love it. There's lots of adventures in there. If you want me to do a play-by-play breakdown, well, adventure 1 is this is how I would run it. Let us know in the comments down below. We only know what to make if you tell us what you want. And yes, so let us know in the comments down below, or join us on Discord, discord.gg/greatgm, or all the other stuff. But you know that by now. You stayed for the bonus content. Until next time, I wish you and yours a very joyful journey into Avernus.